Let's get into the meat and the potatoes of the Patriots, man, because so much has gone on for them this offseason. I did like an offseason breakdown about a month ago when they first did all their signings, literally almost like a month to today. But I want to talk about their draft. I want to talk about kind of what they have going on. They are the darlings of free agency. They have made moves all over the place. So for those of you that aren't following the NFL, they have signed Matthew Judon, Kyle Van Noy. This is not everyone. These are just like the big names. Kyle Van Noy, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Nelson Aguilar, Devon Godchow, Trent Brown, Ted Karras. Trent Brown came from a trade. They were also able to retain David Andrews, James White, Lawrence Guy, J.C. Jackson, Cam Newton. The only real losses for the team were Joe Thuney, who ended up going to the Chiefs, Julian Edelman, who retired, and Patrick Chung, who also retired. And Julian Edelman didn't even play a full season last year. Patrick Chung didn't even play last year. And with all of that, and literally 3 losses to the, I don't know what, like 15 names I just read off there, 12 names, they still have $16 million in cap space remaining. I don't even know how that works. Because everyone was talking about, oh, they spent so much money, but they're sitting here with $16 million in cap space still remaining. That's absurd. They could literally go and sign somebody else if they really wanted to at this point. For their team needs, I'll give you mine, and then I'm curious to see what you have to say about this. This is what I've identified as, and I kind of changed this up literally after Julian Edelman announced his retirement. I have quarterback circled because, as everyone seems to think, it's like a mixed bag of reviews on Cam Newton. Wide receiver, I think, has sprung a little bit more importance now. They did sign Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar, but I think outside of them two, you can't really rely on everybody else too much. Jacoby Myers, maybe. The safety position with the loss of Patrick Chung. And then I wrote interior defensive line on here because I think that, you guys lost Adam Butler, replacing him with Devon Godchaw, I think is that's about like equatable, but you could still maybe get somebody else in there with, the ability to draft the way you guys can since you signed so much in free agency. What are you looking at for team needs?
For team needs, yeah. My top 3 are pretty much the same as your top 3. Obviously, quarterback's the number 1. I think Cam Newton could be really good next year, having a full offseason instead of the late offseason he got with the Patriots last year. Having a full season, knowing the system, knowing what to expect, building some of that chemistry. Obviously, the offense is going to look a little bit different with 4 new weapons who are probably going to be starting for him next year. But I think this could be a really good year for Cam Newton. I think Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry bringing back the 2 tight end monster New England is really going to make a humongous impact. I think it'll make a huge impact in the running game as well. The running game was solid, if not unspectacular, last year. Damian Harris showed that he could be that bell cow type of back given the right opportunity. Obviously, they made some changes to their offensive line. I think all of them are net positive, like bringing back a guy like Trent Brown was really good, bringing back a guy, Ted Karras, who they call Steady Teddy for good reason. Nice steady force who can play a bunch of different positions on that offensive line. Really good. One of the better backup offensive linemen in the league, in my opinion. You got a really good but young offensive line with guys like Michael Onwenu, Isaiah Wynn. So I think we could really see like an improvement in the running game. Also, wide receiver, they did add a couple guys. I think Bourne, Aguilar, and Myers is a significantly better top 3 receiving core than you had last year. Because last year, after Edelman went down, all you really had was Myers, N'Keal Harry, who's about as inconsistent as they come, never really has gotten that production that they've wanted to out of their former first-round pick. Then after that, it was just kind of a laundry list of Husu guys signed off the practice squad, guys coming from all over the place.
Who was that guy? The guy number 89, I think was his number. Was it something? Demetrius Byrd? Is that what his name was?
Yeah, Demarius Byrd. He's gone.
Byrd. Okay, he's not even on the team anymore. All right.
Yeah, he's gone. So I think that's the big reason why they gave so much money to Aguilar. They want a guy in that Demarius Byrd role. Demarius Byrd was to take the top off the kind of defense kind of guy. That's what Nelson Aguilar does the best. He's great at taking the top off the defense. But I could definitely see them taking one of the later receivers. I don't see them taking a top receiver unless a guy like Jamar Chase has an unbelievable fall and somehow is available at 15, which I doubt he will be. I don't think Devontae Smith is going to be there. Jalen Waddle might be, but I don't know how high Bill Belichick is on a small guy like Jalen Waddle. It'll be interesting to see. But I don't personally have interior defensive line as an issue. I think they did a really good job of addressing that this offseason. Lawrence Guy, who was there last year, was pretty much like their most steady contributor on that. He's honestly was one of their best defenders last year on a weak defensive line. But adding a guy like Davin Godchaux and another guy who doesn't get mentioned enough, who I think was a really, really solid pickup, was Henry Anderson coming over from the Jets.
Yeah.
He played for Indianapolis for a bit. I think, although he's not really like a star, he's not really a starting type of guy. I think he's a really solid piece.
Mm-hmm. He's a good rotational player. He never lived up to what Indianapolis expected him to be, but he was definitely a really good rotational player. He's not somebody that you're going to count on to be like a 3-down guy, but plug and play. He can do a solid job for what it needs to be done.
Exactly. Last year we saw with the Patriots, whenever Lawrence Guy wasn't in the game, coming out to grab a breather, we saw they would just get run over immediately. Yeah. So bringing in a guy like Henry Anderson can spell your starters for a couple plays, but now really have that huge drop off would be absolutely massive. They signed him for a 2-year, $7 million, $3 million guaranteed. So he's barely making any money. Good, solid roster piece, well respected in the locker room. So that's another solid piece. Also adding in the edge rushers. Bringing in Matthew Judon, bringing back Kyle Van Noy to add to Uche Winovich and Anfernee Jennings, and obviously Dante Hightower coming back too. I think all that helps too, because their linebacking core was as porous as you could possibly find last year. They were not very good. So bringing in a bunch of different guys with a lot of different versatility really helps that interior defensive line as well. But also, I feel like they definitely need to address the cornerback / safety position. They need to bring in another defensive back. Mccarty can opt out after next year. So he's getting towards the end of his career too, not as young as he once was. So maybe finding a guy that would replace him. I know they brought in Kyle Duggar last year, who showed some flashes last year of being a really solid player in this league, but still has some development to go depending on how Belichick sees him. I think they could target a guy. I have a couple safeties they could target as well. And with the unknown of Stephon Gilmore's situation, people still see him as one of the biggest trade chips in the league right now. So the unknown of that also would lead me to believe that they're probably going to be targeting a corner in this draft. Again, maybe a second or third round corner, unless one of the top corners ends up falling them at 15, maybe a J.C. Horn, maybe a Caleb Farley type. But yeah, those are my biggest needs on the team right now.
All right. So we're kind of on the same page. Now, the only reason I put the interior defensive line on there is because everything that I listen to, and I feel like it's just because Patriots fans have become so accustomed to like the Patriots doing this in the first round, is everyone keeps saying interior defensive line in the first round. I was listening to 98.5 the other day, and they were like, wouldn't it be such a Patriots thing if they went and just, they went and drafted, the best interior defensive line that's there? Because who is it that has a first round grade? Christian Barrymore, I think he's like projected as like roughly the 15th best player in the draft, which falls right in line with their pick at number 15 if they were to fall in that order per se. So I was curious as to like what you thought about that, or if that's just people like stressing about how the Patriots are going to go in this draft. So let's talk about round number 1. I really want to focus on, like we did the other day, a little focus more so on the 3 rounds. I'm going to let you really shine if you have guys later in the draft. The Patriots are your team, so I know that you'll have a really good insight on them. The first round, I feel like, is such a mixed bag for New England. It could literally go any way. Some people are saying that they're not going to trade up. I've seen mock drafts that have them trading up to number 4. I've seen them trading up to like number 7 or 8 or something like that to go after Justin Fields. But Justin Fields seems to be the guy that keeps getting connected to New England. At this point, and you said this the other day, the draft really doesn't start until pick number 4. Everyone else is just taking a quarterback, and it almost feels like it's going to be Trevor Lawrence, then it's going to go Zach Wilson, and then it's going to be Mac Jones. I know that the 49ers just went and saw Justin Fields at their pro day, but everyone really keeps tying the 49ers to Mac Jones. So with the assumption that Justin Fields is available for round 1, I'm looking at a few different players. If we're going to go with what everyone is trying to predict here and somehow the Patriots trade up for Justin Fields, I think it wouldn't be a bad idea. I think he'd be the perfect guy to learn behind Cam Newton. Cam Newton would make a really good sort of teacher for Justin Fields. He's kind of been scrutinized in a similar fashion. And I'm not saying that Justin Fields has been scrutinized, but he's almost being slighted right now. He went from being like the number 2 guy to all of a sudden he's going to be the number 4 guy. So I think Cam Newton can kind of relate to him on that. He's kind of been through the ringer the last few years of his career. so he can really help Justin Fields through highs and lows. He's been to the top of the mountain. He played in a Super Bowl. He was the MVP at one point, the best quarterback in the league. So, I mean, I think that Justin Fields going behind Cam Newton would be good. As for wide receiver, you said it earlier. If they were going to go wide receiver, I really don't believe in those first top 3 wide receivers being there for the Patriots to snag at 15. I don't think Belichick would trade up for a wide receiver given his inability to draft and produce actual wide receivers aside from Julian Edelman. So I'm looking at somebody like maybe Rashad Bateman or Elijah Moore. I feel like that's more realistic. And even if they don't go for them at 15, if they trade back a few spaces, if someone's hungry trying to move up and they think that they could snag them in like picks like 20 to 25 and keep themselves in the first round, I could see something like that. As for interior D-line, I would assume that if they're going to actually do that, and again, I don't really think they should, but I guess that they're eyeing Christian Barmore if that's where they would go IDL, but that's kind of like where I'm looking for first round for the Pats.
Yeah, so in the first round, I think the first round is going to be super key in determining where they're going to go the rest of the draft.
Definitely.
Once that first night comes, we see who they pick. It's going to be a lot easier to make predictions on what they go. It's kind of a wide open. There are a lot of different ways I could see them going. The only way I see them, like you said, I don't see them trading up to take a wide receiver. Belichick's pride, like I'm sure he would be crazy enough to do it, but I don't foresee him doing that for Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith. And there's a chance Waddle could be there for you at 15. There's a chance he slides a little bit given his injury concerns over the past few years. But other than that, there's no real wide receiver that you're willing to take at 15. There are a couple of good ones that you could see go towards the top of the second round, but no one really I could see going there at 15 besides the top 3. But besides that, another name I've been seeing that's been tied to them a lot is a guy like Micah Parsons out of Penn State. He's a guy that could slip with the run on offensive players that we're probably going to end up seeing, especially at the top of this draft. We're seeing the receivers, the offensive tackles, the quarterbacks go. So we could see a guy like Micah Parsons slip, especially a guy who didn't play last year, opting out of Penn State. So that's another option we could see out there as well. So that would be a really great option for them. With Dante Hightower going into the last year of his contract, having a guy who can play sideline to sideline could be a monster linebacker. With Belichick's had no problem developing linebackers.
So that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you see guys like Dante Hightower, Juwan Bentley. You've seen guys like Brewski come through, Mike Vrabel. Like linebackers, New England is linebacker U right now. I think that's a great spot for a linebacker to end up. So I think Micah Parsons could be good there for them. Another option I could see them going is the cornerback. It'll be interesting to see how the cornerbacks are rated. A guy like J.C. Horn might be available to them at number 15. Obviously, a guy at South Carolina. Had some comparisons drawn to Stephon Gilmore. So if you do end up trading Stephon Gilmore, getting Stephon Gilmore 2 wouldn't be a bad option. And then you see a guy like Caleb Farley out of Virginia Tech, who's seen as probably the highest upside of all the corners, but obviously not playing last year and making a recent switch to quarterback. He has less knowledge, but he does have probably the highest ceiling out of all of them, given his physical capabilities. Mm-hmm. And you have a guy like Patrick Surtain, who coming out of Alabama, obviously Saban and Belichick have a connection there. So that'd be another great option for them as well. If one of the corners is there, I could realistically see them taking any of the top 3. And then the big question mark is quarterback. We could see them trade up. That's not out of the realm of possibility. We've seen Belichick do a lot of things this offseason we've never seen him do before, so I'm not discounting anything. I think 4 is probably out of the reach, given what Belichick has been willing to give up for draft day trades in the past. I think 4 might be a bit too crazy for him. I think we see if a guy like Fields slips to like 7 or 8, it slips to like 7 or 8. We could see them trade with the Carolina, with the Detroit. That would be a lot more realistic. You wouldn't have to give up nearly as much to get 7 or 8, especially at 8 with Carolina. Carolina just traded for a quarterback and still being a young team, so just giving them more picks. Because the Patriots have a ton. They have multiple 4th-round picks. They have multiple late-round picks. So giving up a couple picks for the 8th pick wouldn't be nearly as big a reach for them. So we
Yeah.
could see if Justin Fields slip, or maybe a Trey Lance slips and they fall in love with Trey Lance.
I like that you said the number 8 trade with Carolina if that was to happen, because I see people putting Carolina still drafting a quarterback after trading for Sam Darnold, and what a ridiculously backwards thing that would be if they were to do that. To not only trade for Sam Darnold, pick up his 5th-year option, and take a quarterback in this draft. Like, what are you doing? No. I like that. The trade with the Panthers, I think, is super realistic. I like that. That's actually a really good thought.
Yeah, and another one they've been linked to was a trade with Dallas at 10. Obviously, with Denver picking at 11, if a quarterback, one of the top 5 quarterbacks makes it to Denver at 11, I think we could see John Elway pulling the trigger on that. So
Definitely.
10 is probably the last spot where we see if one of the quarterbacks is slipping. That's probably the last spot we could see a trade, because obviously they make it to Denver at 11. I think there's about a 0% chance we see all 5 any of the top 5 quarterbacks make it past that 11. So by the time 12 rolls around, all the top 5 quarterbacks are going to be out. And then from there aren't any real quarterbacks you'd be willing to risk a first-round pick on, unless somebody might fall in love with somebody. Like, we could see somebody fall in love with a Davis Mills. I actually been researching that, and apparently Pittsburgh loves him as a big quarterback to sit for a year behind Ben Roethlisberger, so we could see him in the first round, but I think 15 is way too high for Davis Mills. But it'll be interesting to see what Belichick does. Jerry Jones doesn't seem like the type of guy who likes to trade back. He seems like the uber aggressive, so we could see Jerry Jones trade back and then trade back up into like maybe the 60 to 20. That sounds very Jerry Jones-esque.
Yeah.
He likes to do things big, so be interesting to see what happens there.
That's such a Cowboys thought right there. Yeah, Jerry Jones trades back just to trade right back up. I could see something like that. Well, the thing is like, it didn't really like not cross my mind, but it didn't really like click to me just how realistic, I guess, the possibility of the Patriots trading up is, because they have a first rounder, a second rounder, a third. They have 3 fourth rounders, and then they also have the 2 6, and then they have 1 in the other rounds 5 and 7 too. So they do have a lot of extra capital where they could theoretically like put in some massive package where they're like, here's all our 4th rounders, and here's like the 3rd rounder is technically like they got that's a comp pick for Brady. So I mean, that's almost like they weren't going to have that I guess maybe they were planning to have that since they knew Brady was going, but like you get that pick because of Brady, so you didn't have it initially. That's kind of like a throwaway pick. You could realistically trade away if you wanted to try to like put that into some package deal to slide up. So it wasn't until I sat down and like put this all together that I really saw, okay, the Patriots trading up for somebody like Justin Fields, I guess, isn't that unrealistic. So let's talk about round number 2. I have a couple different guys that are listed on here that I picked out specifically. I think that somebody like, and again, I'm going with the interior defensive line thing just based off of why, because I keep hearing people linking them to interior defensive linemen. Someone like Marvin Wilson out of Florida State, he had a down year in 2020, but the 2 years prior, PFF graded him 90 plus. And he was really disruptive. I guess he dropped some weight going into the season and played a different position on the interior. So some people were saying that maybe that was the cause for his slip. The other guy that I have on here, I didn't pick a safety or any defensive backs in the first round just because I felt like and you might know better than I do on this one. I can't remember the last time the Patriots went first round secondary. I don't know if there's somebody that I'm not thinking of.
Devin McCourty.
Devin McCourty was a first round pick. I think he was like 29. Yeah, what was that, 2009?
Not quite that long ago, but
10, 11. He's been
10,
around
11,
10, 11, something like that. A long time ago, per se. So It's just not the status quo for New England to go secondary in the first round. So Richie Grant from UCF, the only real knock I could find on him is people just don't think he's fast enough and that he can't cover the field enough or quickly enough. So those are the 2 guys I have. I like the Richie Grant pick. I think that's that just seems more like a second round pick for New England. I don't think that they're going to target quarterback in the second round. Like you were saying, outside of those top 5 quarterbacks that are probably going to be gone within the first 11, 12 picks, there's nobody that I could see really worth a second round pick at quarterback unless, the Patriots are all about Kyle Trask or something internally and they're just hoping that he slips far enough to them. But, I know that some people have tied him to Pittsburgh. Davis Mills, you said Pittsburgh's interested in. That was where I kind of picked up on his name when we were talking about the Steelers the other day. So I'm curious to see what they do with the quarterback position if it's not in the first round. And I actually have a point to be made about this a little bit later, so we'll get into that afterwards. But what are you thinking for round number 2? Safety or IDL kind of makes sense for me.
Yeah. Safety is probably the biggest position I have circled for them in the second round. I think a guy like Trevon Moehrig out of TCU, exactly what Belichick is looking, a guy with a lot of potential, home run potential, could be the next Devin McCourty type of player. Really intelligent player, plays very smart and sound. Just never really put together the type of numbers you'd want to see for a top tier safety, but a second round pick is definitely the type of place where I could see him going. But Trevon Moehrig out of TCU has a lot of experience on special teams, which Belichick is going to circle and say, oh, love that. Belichick has been a huge special team guy. They've had an elite special team group for years and years, and it's won them games in numerous cases. Like we see when New England won against the Chargers last year, they had multiple special teams touchdowns.
Matthew Slater might literally be the best special teamer I've ever seen. I feel like he has always been on New England, and all he really does is he's like a gunner on the punt team. Like, that's it.
Greatest gunner of all time, in my opinion.
Literally.
Argument for another day. The guy like Trevon Moehrig could be really good for them. A guy to develop for a year under Devin McCourty, then after Devin McCourty leaves. Yeah, so Moehrig would be good. Then also cornerback could be another place they could go. I can see him going. Tyson Campbell out of Georgia. That's another type of player, a bigger cornerback, about 6'1", moves pretty well. That could be another option. I could see them as well. I don't think it's out of the question they draft a quarterback day 2. We see with Jimmy Garoppolo, that's what they did. They drafted a guy that people are high on, but was coming from not really a great place. So we could see him go quarterback round 2. I could see him realistically going a guy like Kellen Mond out of Texas A&M.
Okay.
That's a guy a lot of people are very high on. He's being compared to Cam Newton just with a better arm, which could be fantastic. 4-year starter out of Texas A&M. Highly productive, played in the SEC, played against the Alabamas of the world, the University of Florida. So he's playing against NFL talent. That could be a guy as well. Davis Mills, I don't think is going to be there for them when they end up picking in the second round. I think somebody's going to fall in love with him. Big, smart guy out of Stanford. Only played 1 year, but is really productive. But I could see them going Davis Mills if he's available in the second round. Then from there are a couple of receivers who I've circled that I could see them going in the second round. There's one guy, Amari Rogers out of Clemson. Super talented player. Not really as big as you want to see, but the term that gets thrown around with him is thick and quick. So Amari Rogers isn't the tallest guy. He's about 5'9", 5'10". So he's not the tallest guy, but he's about 5'9", 5'10", 212. So he's very wide for his size.
That's big for 5'9". That's crazy.
Yeah. So he's very big for his size.
Thick and quick.
Thick and quick.
Thick and quick. Okay.
Moves well for a guy of his stature. Highly productive player, obviously playing with Trevor Lawrence at Clemson. He was his number one option this past year. So that's another great option for him as well.
He's got the big game experience too that like a team like New England can value more than maybe another team.
Exactly. Exactly. Then the last guy I could see them possibly going is a guy, Kenneth Gainwell out of Memphis. It's a running back, not really a position I've circled as a position of need, but Belichick has never been shy about drafting running backs at any point in the draft except the first round. Now, he drafted Sony Michel a few years ago, so never been shy about running backs. Always likes to have a deep stable of running backs on the roster. With Rex Burkhead leaving and James White only on a 1-year deal, bringing in a guy to learn from those guys. I know they have J.J. Taylor, who they seem to like on the roster, but bringing in another running back, guy like Kenneth Gainwell, super athletic guy out of Memphis, projects in that James White type of role where he's not really a lead back type of guy, but really solid pass catcher out of the backfield as well as runs very hard. So another James White type of guy, I could see them going.
Definitely. I could see that too. I feel like the Patriots are always looking for running backs. They've always had such a rotational type of backfield where, they don't need somebody in the first round other than like you said, they picked Sony Michel a few years ago. But other than that, like they're more of a team that just rolls with a bunch of running backs. And even with Sony Michel, like, has he really lived up to that first round moniker? Probably not. I would say he's had his flashes, but not quite what you guys were looking for picking him in that first round. So you brought up some wide receivers. I like the Amari Rogers one. I'm not sure if he's going to be there just because I like Amari Rogers. I think he might be like late first round, top 10 of the second round. Cause if like all these teams are going quarterback in the first round in the top 5 or, top 10 or whatever it ends up shaking out to be, I think a lot of those teams are going to look for wide receivers to pair with those new young quarterbacks. So I almost feel like he might be gone by then, but he could slip. In the third round, I actually do have them looking at somebody wide receiver, Dax Milne from BYU. 2 drops last year. That's it. Strong hands. The only real concern that I was able to find is that people think that he gets a little bit bullied by stronger physical corners. If that's something he can overcome, or maybe he can work on his release coming off the line. I think that somebody like that, I mean, you want somebody who's going to catch balls, and especially in the Patriots sense, who have had some receivers that have dropped a lot of football. You remember when you guys had Brandon LaFell? I mean, talk about brick hands. I think that, the Patriots are a team that really is, they'll take somebody with sure hands over the speed and like deep threat ball. I mean, Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, those guys never blew people over the top, but they were getting 100 catches a year. So I think somebody like that would be really like a really solid third round pick for you guys. I don't really have anyone else other than you said Kellen Mond in the second round. That's like somebody I could look at. Maybe Davis Mills. I don't think Davis Mills goes second round. I feel like he's probably he's like a late day 2 guy. I think he could fall even further. If somebody uses a second round pick on him, or if like the Steelers really like him and they trade back to take him early in the second round, that would be kind of crazy to me. Another guy that isn't really on teams' radars right now, but was good when he was playing, but he sat out last year, Jamie Newman from Georgia. I feel like a lot of people forgot about him. Pretty solid guy. Sat out last year, obviously, so I feel like he's kind of like an afterthought. But I'm thinking round 3, someone like maybe Davis Mills or Jamie Newman if they're sitting around there, because I'd be shocked to see Davis Mills go that early. Like you said, he only had a year of play time, so I think that's something that'll keep teams from being willing to invest too much into him.
Yeah, Jamie Newman's a guy I like, but coming from Wake Forest, where he produced well, but transferred to Georgia, never really got the opportunity to play, with him opting out this past year. But he's incredibly raw. He may not even be ready after a year of sitting behind somebody, so not really sure on him, like what his potential is. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, really great athlete, could be a really solid player down the road, but down the road is the key point there with Jamie Newman. But in the third round, there are a lot of different ways they could go. I see them circling a guy like Tylan Wallace out of Oklahoma State. Uber productive, big hands, 5'11", 194, so a little small for an outside receiver, but incredibly productive at Oklahoma State through a bunch of different quarterback issues they had here. They had a bunch of different guys playing quarterback. They had a lot of injury issues, but 3 strong years of production. Not a whole lot of injury concerns, which is always a big plus. The real question of Tylan Wallace, obviously coming from the Big 12, you don't see a lot of NFL caliber coverage coming from the Big 12. Like I said, I like to call it the Madden League, where you're just chucking it downfield or handing it off to your elite speed running back and just going for it and scoring 60 a game. But I think he could be a really solid player for them. Rock steady production for these 3 seasons, and he's a really solid route runner too. So a guy like that in the third round would be a great pickup for them. Another name I've circled is Dylan Moses out of Alabama, linebacker, elite. Cannot speak to enough about how elite an athlete this guy is. Coming out of college, he was a top linebacker prospect, 5-star recruit. He may be, and I'm not overstating when I say this, he may be a top 10, 15 athlete in this draft. If we were drafting just on athleticism, he'd be an easy first-round pick, but he's a little slight for a linebacker. He's only about 6'1", 225, which is kind of more of a running back build, but he definitely has
the linebackers are getting small.
Frame.
Linebackers are getting small, and they're getting quick. So in a few years, that's pretty close to norm.
Yeah. I think that's a great guy. Very high IQ guy. Played 4 years at Alabama. Played in all 4 years. Didn't start all 4 years, but incredibly productive, team captain, good leader. So that's a very Belichickian type of guy. Loves taking those Alabama linebackers. Obviously, we see him brought in Anthony Jennings last year. We see a guy like Dante Hightower he brought in. Those Alabama linebackers always do well in New England. His chase speed is elite tier. I think he could be really good. So I think that'd be a great flyer for them to take in the third round. Also has a little bit of injury concerns with him, but if he hits, that could be your replacement for Dante Hightower. Ability to play sideline to sideline would be impressive. That's another great option. Then from there, there are a couple different offensive linemen. I think that'd be a good spot for them to take an offensive lineman, get a good backup in, get a guy that could take some pressure off of your starters. Maybe a guy like Quinn Miners out of University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, not really a well-known program, but he was the talk of the Senior Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
He stepped right in at the Senior Bowl and played like a 12-year pro. If you ever want a really interesting YouTube video to watch, he used to work out in the woods, so I recommend looking those up afterwards. Really fascinating guy, strong as could be. Is probably a year or two away from fully being able to contribute to a roster, but that'd be a great guy to take a flyer on. You don't really have a hole in your offensive line right now that you need to plug, but down the road, those things pop up all the time with injuries and all that thing. And
you can never have too many offensive linemen. As a Colts fan, I have watched offensive lines fail our team time and time again up until the last few years, and I have adopted the adage that you can never have too many offensive linemen, in my opinion. I think that's almost like severely underappreciated spot sometimes, because I've seen what can happen with a bad O-line, and in New England's case, adding depth to, I mean, you guys are sitting top 10 O-line, probably even higher than that. I'm just guessing off the top of my head. To add some depth to that, I could definitely see that being a good spot for them to go. Especially Quinn Miners, if he gets his fundamentals down, dude, he's going to be good because he's a beast. He's an absolute beast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's a joy to watch. Then I just have two more really quick names and we go through that I could see them targeting in the third round. Marvin Wilson, who you mentioned, I think he'll be there for him in the third round. Another great option. Big guy, 6'4", 303, multiple years of starting, so he has experience. Didn't have really the year you would have liked him to, but bringing in a guy like that, even if you're not playing him all the time, just to learn behind guys like Lawrence Guy, Davin Godchaux, would be another great option for him as well. The last name I want to mention is Elijah Molden out of Washington. Really, really passionate. You can see like how much he loves the game just watching him play. Coming out of Washington, past few years, we've seen a lot of guys get drafted out of Washington and have NFL success. Kind of a bit of a tweener, but the Patriots have had no problem drafting those in the past. Can play some corner, can play some safety. Just a really good football player, really good football guy. So I think that could be another great option for them as well.
I liked the Marvin Wilson one. I thought second round because I thought maybe he would be gone before that third, but if he does slip, I want to look into the reason why his play slipped more, because when I started researching him, I only kind of like grazed the surface a little bit, and it has something to do with him dropping weight to play a different position, I guess. But the previous 2 seasons before that, like I had said, PFF graded him 90 plus, and he was like a terror. So I want to find out more about what actually happened for his little fall off last season and what exactly that was all attributed from.